So let's get started. Good evening, everyone. Good morning. Before we begin, please join me in rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For anyone wondering, Councilmember Jason Mauer is joining us on teleconference. So that's who you hear behind us. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I thank everyone for being out here tonight. As you know, probably, I'm Ken Kellogg, for Selectman, and this is Tony Scott, the chairman of our Parks and Rec Commission. I wanted to just start out again by thanking everyone to be here and to talk tonight about the concept of the Performance Pavilion at Wolf Park. I think we all can agree this is not a new idea, but it is an idea that as a town we want to discuss in more detail to best determine how we will proceed. We know the current use of the temporary stage has resulted in a very successful evolution. We have our Arts in the Park program, the summer concert series, and I think I speak for both of us to say that we fully support arts and cultural events in our community. Our goal is really to work collaboratively to provide robust programming and also do it in an appropriate fashion. So earlier this year, our town council was presented with this concept. At the time, they simply determined that more research and information was needed before they felt comfortable endorsing the project. Regardless of how it is organized, the effort to place a permanent structure on the town park has to have the support of our town council in addition to various other appointed and elected town officials. I want to be clear tonight, there's no vote here tonight. That's not what this is about. That's not the intent. Tony and I are here simply to listen to your input and to have some conversation about this. The ideas that we generate, the issues that are raised, will be used to further inform our Parks and Rec Commission, whom I've asked to take a fresh review of the concept based upon the new information and the information tonight and provide me with their input and their recommendations going forward. So to make kind of efficient use of our time, I ask that please limit your comments to the pavilion concept and specifically to the issues that have been raised in the past or any new issues you may have concern over. I think we're particularly interested in your collective thoughts around project organization, oversight, and the fundraising activities that have been proposed and how the town might partner with a nonprofit organization in that regard. We'd like to talk about the size and scope of events to be considered, which in turn would determine the size and scope of the structure and the need for parking. The issues that have been raised regarding noise and impacts to the neighborhood. And finally, last but not least, the location of the structure. Is the current location the best solution? Should the stage be, should it be there? Should it be positioned differently? Could this concept work in a different park on the lakeside? There's different parking issues, but again, those are the different things that I think we want to all understand. So to be respectful of everyone's time tonight, I ask you please keep your comments concise so we can hear from everyone who wants to speak. That said, did you want to add anything further, Tony, from your perspective of the commission?
No, I mean, we have monthly meetings. This will be carried on into those monthly meetings. I encourage anyone who wants to come and have a conversation more directly with the commission, please come and talk. We have public hearing time at every meeting, and I hope that we see more folks there, and then we can hear more after this conversation as we move through this whole process.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so that said, the floor is yours. Ask if you want to come up to just at least please introduce yourself. But we're trying to be. I'd like this to be somewhat conversational. The intent is not to be overly formal, but we would like to have your name for record. So, Rich, you want to start off?
Do we talk up there? Or talk
If you'd like to, I mean, if you want to, I mean, It's entirely up to you. I think others might hear you better if you came up, but
Thanks, Ken.
I'm not going to stand on ceremony. If someone's more comfortable sitting down, I'll listen to you either way. So.
Hi, I'm Rich Papsco, 266 Cutler's Farm Road. I live directly across the street from the park and in direct firing line of the current structure. Noise until this year has never been addressed because I don't think anyone ever complained. And for me, it was not so much a complaint as letting the people that are running the events in the park know that it's loud. It's substantially loud. And I did this in the past. I will commend the work of Ken, especially Bob Premerick, working very close this year, made great strides in progress to move speakers, keep the volume at a reasonable level. I like the concerts. I like the plays. I love that the town is doing it. It's just very, very loud. It's very hard for me. I can't entertain at my house when there's something going on in the park, even inside the house. It's that loud. That issue is being addressed. We're working on it. So thank you very much. My current concerns would be the sighting. My opinion, and once again, I don't know, I'm not an acoustical engineer, but if it were down by the lake, in that the hollow area facing up towards the picnic area, you have a natural built-in bowl, substantial amount of forest behind it to help dampen the noise. And I believe there used to be stuff down there back in the day. Other issues that are raised that are out of my purview, parking, police, the whole 9 yards, but just because by default the stage is where it currently is, doesn't mean that it's the best place for increased usage. Concerns I've had with some people I was speaking about are, what type of events are we looking to attract? Is it the same type of events but in a bigger format, or are we looking to bring in additional outside concerts, music festivals? There are domino effects with that. You know, they stopped the vibes because it became out of control with drugs and alcohol and sanitation issues. Are we looking to have 2-day festivals? I love the arts. I support the arts. If we're opening it up to everyone, and please don't take this the wrong way, but what if the local chapter of the white supremacists decide to hold a kids play? Hitler, what a great guy. It's art. I don't agree with the political message. I think it's a horrible thing. But now that's going to attract a crowd. And that's going to attract complete off the scale hypothetical there. But how do we determine down the road who can come and use it? Who can't come and use it? If it's raising money, is it for the people that are putting it on? Will the town just have a rental agreement with the insurances and on and on and on? So there are many more things outside of just where it is, how big it is going to be, it's how's it going to be used, and who's it open to, and does the town have an ultimate right of refusal if there's something that's too overtly outdoor country. Okay. Yes, thank you. And the problem there is, God forbid, we're building this beautiful thing. Do we want a headline in the Connecticut Post saying, Monroe, Arts and Performance Pavilion is not allowing art? So you have all these things to think about. And once again, I'm just spitballing here, but there's a lot involved. I think it's a great idea if it's in the right place, if the sound for whomever the neighbors will be don't have to live the way I've been living, and that the town has oversight so that things don't run amok and we don't end up with crowd control issues, drug issues, sanitation issues, especially if it's down by the lake and there's a line for the bathroom, you know where they're going, and people swim and fish in that lake. So there's an awful lot of pieces to put together. That's it. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for the forum.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. O'Hara.
little creaky after 6 o'clock.
Pat O'Hara, 282 Shelton Road.
I've got a laundry list of concerns, and I'm going to dovetail along with some of what Rich said. I'll try and be concise and move through this. First of all, the town of Monroe, my belief as former chairman of planning and zoning for 7 years, member for 8 years, the use of outdoor entertainment is not currently permitted in the park. How it got there in the first place is another matter and not really what I'm concerned about discussing right now. But the actual use is not currently permitted. So if you are going to go forward with a structure of this magnitude, you have to go and get the use somehow included in the regulations. Now, also please remember, once you open that door of the use of outdoor recreation, it's not that the town doesn't have precedence of being the only group that has outdoor recreation. So now go to Rich's next point, which is who gets to use it? Everybody gets to use it. Our parks are open to everybody. Now, the only way you're going to control it, just spitballing, is that if the Parks and Rec Department completely controls the use of it, meaning the only thing that goes in that facility are your sponsored programs, but that means you won't rent it. But if you rent it, and you rent everything else, so I have no reason to believe that you wouldn't be renting it, the only thing the town of Monroe can do a ×2 price. So your pool is open, your pavilion is open, your picnic area is open. As a matter of fact, you tout the revenue that you make from the corporate affairs that are out-of-towners who are going to bring in all that money. So if you do it and you rent it once, everybody can rent it. And Rich gave you some examples of things that would be a little difficult for the town to deal with, along with the obvious, the parking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'll bring up another point. The taxpayers of this community spent $40-some-odd million a few years ago for an indoor performance pavilion over at Massac High School. That indoor performance pavilion is rentable. That rent represents revenue to the Monroe Board of Education and therefore to the taxpayer of the town of Monroe. So you're going to be robbing from Peter to pay Paul, perhaps. I don't know. What else was on the list? I gave Ken my copy of the, I believe it's 2002 master plan for the park.
Which I in turn gave to our chairman of our Parks and Rec Commission and asked them to
I think
dust off and review.
I think it's been 16 years. The first thing you need to do is a master plan for the park to see if this has any place in the park. Because the fact of the matter is you need to master plan what you're going to do with the park. Then you need to decide, is this Parks and Rec events only, and find out legally if you're allowed to close it down, or do you have to rent? You know, I believe we took HUD grants. So once we took grants, I looked at the record from 1972 and HUD grants were mentioned. As it stands right now, look, I don't think there's anybody who's going to speak on this for or against it that is against the arts. I've seen a lot of good, and I've participated myself in high school. But as it stands right now, I oppose this. If you go forward, if you do your diligence, strictly speaking. But if somebody's going to try and do this in a half-baked manner, and you build something that allows outdoor groups to come and rent it, you're going to have all the problems Rich mentioned. And, you know, shame on us. If you can figure out a way to do it, you know, great. But again, we have other places in the town of Monroe that already exist that we've already paid for. And at the end of the day, you know, I've heard this so many times, well, the private group's going to pay for it. No, we pay for it. At some point in time, the private group leaves, the money's gone, somebody lost it, the money runs out, the taxpayer's got to pay for this thing. So there's, you know, I hear some good things. I hear Two Planks is doing good things, and that's great, but they're not going to be here forever. And, you know, I hear that this project could bring good things, and that's great, but at some point, the thing's gonna need a coat of paint, and the taxpayer's gonna have to pay for it. And right now, if you take a look around town, there's a few other things, our DPW facility, I'm sorry, it's a higher priority. I know you've got people who are fundraising for a new playground because you've got a playground that's 30 years old. And you have an auxiliary parking lot that was just permitted a year ago, and you've got a main parking lot that hasn't been paved since, what, 1972? So, in my book, you don't go out and buy new cars when your roof is leaking. And that's kind of what I'm seeing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Householder.
Lee Hostler, 272 Stanley Road. First, I think we need to probably have a review of what we think might be usable in the park. I read an article this past week, the Westport. They have 40-some appearances a year in the Levitt Pavilion. I don't know that. I find that a little difficult because if you're in an enclosed area, that's okay for the people who are playing on that stage. But how about the people who are sitting out there in the line, in the middle of winter? And that brings to another point. How long into the season can you really use it? And because of this crazy climate that we have going on right now, it's kind of difficult to say, oh, well, it doesn't rain in August anymore. Well, it does now, because we've just gone through it. So I think we need to also think about the people that are sitting out there. Are we going to charge them to come in? And how do we support this? Will this be part of our taxes, or are we going to have to support it that way? Will it be self-supporting? I think those are a couple of things that might want to be considered.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Larry Pisani, 12 School Street, Monroe, Connecticut. I'm very recently the current interim executive director of Plank Theater, taking over from Rob. When they had the discussion at the town council meeting last time, and they were discussing funding and stuff like that, it was discussed that that the funding would be private. It would be from raised donations, not to burden myself and other taxpayers in the town. At the same time, there's still a cost as far as the facility, whether it's in the park or down at the lake. At that point, the reason why economic development got involved is because there's an economic benefit to the town, as far as, I know that in past years, as we've done multiple shows there in the park, there's always been very positive comments especially from other families that come from outside of Monroe, to see, first of all, just to see the parks and rec facilities, and as I've heard many times, it's a gem in the town. The fact that the town supports the arts, it's that's again, that's the other side of the coin. There's benefits as well. Again, you could always give and take. Yes, there are issues like they had. You could bring up issues in Bridgeport with the festivals they had there, but then the counter to that is the Levitt Pavilion, which has been running for decades, and has never really had any issues that I'm aware of. And I believe the season is only, again, it's kind of an extended season. I don't think they go into winter. and they bring, and it's a mix of local entertainment as well as outside entertainment. It's also a mix of family-free entertainment as well as some paid performances. They set it up in a location where they can gate it off, so to speak. And the whole point of the pavilion is to assess where's the best location, how do we set it up, how do we do everything to benefit the town as a whole. It can be used, it's currently used not just by Two Planks, but Parks and Rec, and to bring in performances. And it would be a way of making that more permanent and making that extendable throughout the season, again, an extended season. As far as what Butcher brought up, and it's good that we were able to work with you, and again, to hear those issues. Like I said, it really hadn't been brought up in the past, but the moment it was, we were able to address that. And Rob had brought up at the meeting, a permanent structure will also allow you, as far as noise and things like that, to engineer it for, like, sound for that location, that amphitheater, where if you have temporary sound, it's much more difficult to do that, which is why we had the problems that we've had. But clearly they can still be addressed. Again, I think it would be a benefit to the town. They're already known as far as having the Friday concerts and the theater. People come from the outside. If you can make that more permanent and give them more options for entertainment. It's known as a family venue, which helps, because that's who we want to attract to the town. And it can benefit businesses around town. People come in, they want to bring a picnic, they want to have dinner beforehand or afterwards. They'll benefit in that respect as well. But it all takes a coordinated effort and planning. It's not something that's going to be done overnight or that we want to rush to get up. It's just the other side of the coin. All right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, we'll let. Is there anyone who wants a reprise here?
No, just one thing, I don't know if I made it very clear. I went back in the record when we bought this park. This park was purchased for active and passive recreation. Now, I went to the planning and zoning department and I asked if they could pull up the permit that should have been pulled back in 1972. And apparently that would take some Herculean effort because we have boxes and boxes. So I went to the town record and the town meetings are on file. The speakers were very clear. This land was being purchased for active and passive recreation. Now, I understand that the concert series has been going on for 30 years successfully. And I look at that as what I call the nose of the camel. While it's not permitted, nobody's going to give you a hard time about it. But just like the camel's nose in the tent to try and have the camel stay warm, nobody's going to worry about it. This structure is the whole camel coming in the tent. So as you, the Parks and Rec Commission, Mr. Scott, go forward with this, I think you need to remember, we have purchased these lands for recreation, active recreation and passive recreation. This is a completely different use. This is a completely new venue for the Parks and Rec Commission to be involved in. So again, if you are going to go forward with it, I think you need to understand completely your ability to handle it and what it's going to do to our park. You know, I think from what I'm hearing, we're having some successful events with Two Planks. Again, not permitted, okay, but they're successful. Now, if you build the structure and you start to rent it, what's the next step? Is it the Beethoven stuff that people find acceptable? Or is it the wrapping with the four-letter words every third syllable? And then, what does this facility do in terms of impacting the rest of the activity in the park? Now, anybody who's ever owned a boat in this room knows that when you buy a boat, you got 6 weekends to go out on it. You build this structure, and if you rent it, you're going to rent it every day of the week. You're going to rent it 2-3 times a day if you can. Because your season is going to be small. And to Lee Hostler's point, every time it rains, it's going to get smaller. So Parks and Rec Commission needs to be very clear what it's getting involved in. Because if you build this, and if you rent it, you're going to get what you're going to get. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
I have no idea if it's appropriate or not, but can Mr. O'Hara explain for residents that don't know about HUD grants, what exactly that means? And that we're forever indebted to HUD?
When you take state or federal money to buy land, you cannot exclude out-of-town users.
Right, so that's not changing.
But you don't have a performance pavilion right now. So if you have a performance pavilion and if you decide to rent it, an in-town group can use it for, say, $100 a night, an out-of-town group can use it for $200
Right.
a night.
So we're not talking about changing the use of letting people in or not, right? And so I didn't understand the whole part about the HUD grant. It's just to make sure we don't exclude anybody from coming and having use of the park.
Well, Rich, who's one of the neighbors here, made a comment
Yeah.
that, you can have a group that you might not really want renting the facility.
In theory, I've just seen both sides of the coin here. In theory, you can already have that. The white supremacists can rent the pavilion and throw a big hoochie-doo party. What's the difference?
Well, I believe right now you're talking about something that holds a finite number of people and they're going to rent it for a picnic. They're not going to rent it for a rally, are they? Or they're not going to put a flag on.
They can all wear t-shirts
Be
and
careful.
they can all wear t-shirts or play rap music and swear.
But take your pick. It could be, people for odd numbered days and people for even numbered days. You have some facilities right now that are not performance centers. There are places that you rent. Somebody can have a picnic or a gathering, but we don't open the park to political gatherings, do we?
Yeah, we do.
You can, you can rent, there's no fundraising, and there's not going to be any fundraising nor signage of that, but Republican or Democratic town committee could rent a picnic and just have a gathering there, just people just doing that. That is fine, as long as there's no solicitation, I would say, going on.
Right, so it's a very limited scope, and it's always, it's in a certain area. You actually want to know on your application form how many people are going to show up and where they're going to be, what they're going to be doing. This is, we're going to build a performance pavilion, and if somebody wants to have a large number, how many people come out for your place? I didn't get to see one.
It varies,
Pick a number.
anywhere from typically 200 to 400 people.
Okay, so now you're talking about, upwards of 400 people.
I just wanted to understand that the HUD grant in saying that they might not know what they were getting into. There's no talk of excluding people from coming into the park, which is the only thing that references.
When you took state and federal money, you cannot only open the swimming pool to Monroe residents. Monroe residents pay $10, out-of-towners pay $20.
Right, and we can only charge double the in-town price. I get that. So I just want to.
But that extends all across.
Sure, but is that the only aspect that the HUD grants affect?
I wouldn't know. This is the job of the Parks and
Man, I
Rec.
really thought you were going to know this.
Actually, I have a couple of questions as well.
I think his point is that he doesn't want anyone in town to feel that, don't think that we can somehow have extremely tight control over something, because as a public facility, once you open the door, you may have limited ability to restrict who can and can't use that facility. So I think that's the point.
Yeah, that's.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First of all, from describing as far as legitimate use of the park or facilities, I would consider entertainment as being passive recreation. I don't, is there a definition, is there something where they define what passive recreation is as opposed to active recreation? That I would consider listening to a band play or watching a show. A theater would be.
Passive recreation is camping, hiking,
Horseback
Oh my God, that's the
recreation.
most active recreation I've ever thought of.
well, no.
Do they define it as a?
From what I've seen, what you're talking about is the difference between sports fields, swimming pools, tennis courts, baseball diamonds, that sort of thing. That's active, that's active.
Right.
Passive is you are recreating on the land with minimal impact.
Okay, so is that your definition, or was that defined in the documents you referred to, where they said it was used, the legitimate use is active and passive recreation? Did they define what passive? Because, you know, I understand where you're coming from, but from my perspective, I consider watching a show in the park as being passive recreation.
Well, again, my point was I consider it entertainment, which is neither passive nor active. It's a completely different use.
The
I could be-
person sitting there, I think, is passively enjoying it.
Right.
But the play itself, the concert itself, which by the way, I like, I'm not against it. That performance is an artistic performance.
Right.
Which is not, the purpose is not to recreate, it's to perform.
That's entertainment.
It's entertainment. And so it's not the people that come and sit, you have a picnic, you go, you sit down, same thing. Oh, there's music playing? Okay. The question is, can people perform? And once again, not a scholar, that's just what I'm understanding.
Because, I mean, it sounds to me like if they've been having musical performances in the park for, 30 years, like he said, I mean, that sounds like it probably is come under. Again, everybody it's all subjective as far as how you want to define it. I was just asking if it's defined what it is.
So you're asking from the planning and zoning standpoint.
Yes.
It's, as I said, the activities that have been going on, that's the nose of the camel. That's the kind of thing you overlook. You don't send a zoning enforcement officer out and say, sorry, you can't have this. This was 2 hours, they come out, play, they go home. We're now talking about something different, which is a permanent structure, where if Parks and Rec retains 100% control over it, they're going to be living with a lower revenue, but a higher level of control. But if they open it up, they're going to look for a higher revenue and a lower amount of control. But either way, what I'm talking about is from a zoning standpoint, the use that you're talking about is entertainment. Movie theaters are entertainment, bands, plays. Somebody might look at it differently than I am. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, so if a spectator watching a football game, I can consider that entertainment as well.
So let me,
Yeah, the football game actually could be your entertainment, but the people playing football, that is sports.
so I think we could probably have this
Right.
particular discussion on it's a good discussion.
Yeah.
I think what I'll say is to the Parks and Rec Commission, if you get to the point where I mean, I agree that obviously the structure would require planning and zoning approval, it would require an A24 referral, all that stuff. So P&Z issues ultimately come into play, and this would be a use that would have to be clearly fit within the permitted uses. So if we get to that point in time, I'm happy to ask for, we can research this further, whether that's through the commission, whether it's through our land use, attorney, and looking at, I don't know the P&Z definitions off the top of my head as it relates to this, so.
Ken, I think what I'm trying to get people to look at is, before you can talk about who's going to build the pavilion, how they're going to pay for the pavilion, does the Parks and Rec Commission, representing the people of the town of Monroe, want to open up a use of entertainment in the park? Period. Forget structure. Because let's say you want to put up a movie screen and have a movie night. That's entertainment, that's another use. You guys need, you work for the town council and the first selectman, you guys all need to powwow and get together. Is this what we want to be doing with our parks? I gave you the historical perspective. It might make more sense over at Wolf Park, maybe less sense over at Great Hollow Lake. And if you were proposing it over at Web Mountain, I'd haul away because that land is 100% passive recreation. And nobody should be talking otherwise about it. But, yeah, the question for you folks, do you want to open this door? Because you're not just opening it for the performance pavilion, you're opening it up for entertainment anywhere in the park. Pop Warner want to have a band on Sunday? You're going to put a band out there.
Which brings up another question too. How do we limit, like, you know, you talk about the upgrade to the facilities over at Massick. How is that limited? Because I know that there's been groups from Newtown and groups from outside the community that have come and used that stage.
You mean the auditorium?
Yes.
That's all managed through the Board of Education.
But-
So they take in facility use requests, and my understanding, I have to refer to the Board of Ed, or I can have to connect you with someone there, but my understanding is they take in applications from any organization and, you know, it's a bona fide. So that it's allowed, they rent it out.
Yeah. No, I was just asking how they limit, you know, again, you know, how do we keep, National Socialist from putting out a performance there? And how is that limited?
The Board of Education actually has policy online. You can go to, they have a fillable PDF to apply, and the Board of Ed sets annually a rate to rent the facility. Now, one of the things that, you know, if folks are like, hey, Wolf Park isn't the right place, can we use Massick more? Maybe one of the discussions is with the Board of Education, maybe the rate is prohibitive because you're not talking about renting it for one night. You've got to have rehearsals, you've got to have sets, you've got to have an ongoing 6-week process kind of thing. And 6 weeks at $175 a night isn't going to cut it. So maybe one of the conversations to have is with the high school, because they're, for the most part, not using it in July and August.
Oh, no, I know, and I understand that, and I'm not, that wasn't my question. My question was, how do we, you know,
How do they
address
control
the
that?
concerns you had,
If you read-
as far as, you know, limiting what type of, what type of venue gets in there, and who chooses what's appropriate and what isn't.
It's in the board policy. I couldn't tell you the legalese of it, but I glanced at it, and they have control over taste.
All right, so that,
Arguably couldn't be
so that is
used
addressed
as
elsewhere in
or
town.
something in Wolf Park.
something like that,
I'm
that
not
could be used.
familiar, I don't know that level of granularity, how they apply that policy. Or if it's ever been challenged
Okay.
by a group that
But
might say,
it sounds like it wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. I know it depends on the different departments, I understand that.
Move on the Parks and Rec
it's a
website.
totally different.
Two Planks is incorporated into the Parks and Rec website as a Parks and Rec program. So if Parks and Rec were to move forward with this under 100% Parks and Rec control, it limits the rental opportunity. And actually, you're not renting it, you're figuring out some kind of financial, yeah. But you know, Tony pointed out, the pavilion you rent out, the picnic area you rent out, yes, the Democrats can use it, the socialists can use it, the Republicans, the whatever. We're not gonna go set up our flags and give away our stuff, we can have picnics there. This is a different use.
I understand what you're saying.
Dave spends 29 Park.
Yes, Dave.
Is there any parallel here all to the gazebo? Or is that managed in a completely different way?
Well, the gazebo is, I mean, depends upon, it really does depend upon the use. So, it's open town property. It's not uncommon for a wedding to just stop by there and
Right.
it's an open public land and they do their thing, that's fine. If they actually want to reserve it and utilize it for, in other words, we want to actually have our, we're going to be here for a couple hours, we want to make sure no one else is using it, and we want exclusive use of it. There's a process that we go through that comes through my office, is reviewed by all department heads. They would have to provide
It's
insurance.
not part of the
They'd have
rent.
They'd have to
It's your
provide
own.
insurance, the whole
All right.
9 yards.
Okay.
And actually,
There's no parallel problem.
This definitely agree with because
It's
that's
actually
probably
green,
more
it's the same
appropriate
thing.
for it because that's used a lot more for,
Right.
like, Save Our Stephanie and things like that.
Sure.
Events there.
Okay, anyone else who wants to speak? If you want to hold 1 second, because Mr. Connery's hand hasn't
Dennis
spoken
Conley,
yet.
9
so-
Stable Ridge Road. A couple of points that were raised today, and even if we use the previous points,
Two Planks just said there are about 400 people who use the park that night, potentially. At a town council meeting, they said that's upward of 600 at times. I just want to bring something to your attention. Right now, the upper lot for parking on Main Street is 140 spots with 7 handicap spots. The overflow lot, if you get really creative and move the caterpillars, the trailers, the lawnmowers, the storage bins, the mass casualty trailer, and dirt mounds, maybe get another 140. That's 280. Then if you really want to go down the street and piss off the seniors, you can take the 57 spaces there and 6 handicap spots. That's 63 spots, which gives you 343. So if all our concerts have people coming in vans, maybe we'll be able to accommodate this. But for the meantime, you have trouble fitting people, and I've already got complaints from neighbors saying they're parking in front of my house. They can't, I can't get out of my driveway. I know we already heard about the noise, but we already have some issues there. I'm not against, correct, please, all for concerts. My daughter's an actress. But this, I think we have to look at these things from several viewpoints. If you fill the park up with the concert or the play, what happens, Tony, to the rest of your revenue? We're renting out the picnic space, we're renting out the Rotary Pavilion, and getting revenue for that if nobody else can come to the house, right? I've also had complaints from patrons who came to play, to go to the play, and were turned away because they had kids and they said, oh, the play's not appropriate for you. And they're willing to pay their money, but were turned away. And they said, well, that made no sense. I just walked over to the playground and listened to the play there. So now you got patrons who are like, I can't go to the park, even if I'm paying to go to the thing. And as opposed to all the other venues you were talking about, this is a paid performance. You're paying for tickets to go to the play, right? So we basically, de facto, are supporting a business, be it Two Planks, whoever we rent this to provide their services at a fee that the patrons pay for, that exclude them from using the rest of the park, that we don't get any of the revenue for. However, and take this one step further, if you look at all the parking lots we have, albeit they short for the amount of parking, we don't have one single solitary garbage can in any one of those parking lots. And you can't tell me people leaving don't have trash. There's no parking lots in any of the overflow lot, there's no no garbage cans in the regular main lot. I know everybody wants to be a scout and can clean up after themselves, but I guarantee you they won't. So now you have to put in some revenue for garbage cans, at least to consolidate the mess, or at least cleaning up afterwards, what crew, what staff, what people have to do that. You also have to allocate some funds for, let's be serious, there's going to need some police if you got all this traffic. So please look at that when you're looking at this endeavor too, to say how we're going to police the neighborhood. So not only noise abatement, but we also have people not restricted people from getting to their houses, right? Other issue I'd like to bring up is, I know there must be rules about banners because I kept hearing that we're going to put up all these support signs. Well, hopefully the park has some rules in regards to what banners, posters, and support things can be put up at this thing. I know the ongoing maintenance is going to be an issue. Tracking big events, well, I know Two Planks is probably all over this. They right now don't have equity actors, but if you're going to get big shows, you probably need equity actors. So I don't know how that happens unless you change the rules, or maybe you don't do events that require, union people. But it seems at odds. If you're saying you're going to be attracting big events and doing big events, I don't know how you do that given your current restricted rules. So there's some points. A couple other brief points. There seems to have been, at least from Two Planks website, you've grown from regional theater, obviously, basically United Methodist to main stage to have it in town. I don't know how, because I've looked through minutes, haven't seen and don't know how, other than in June of this year, when we have a contract, how town council or anybody authorized the regional theater to be in the town. I don't see that documented anywhere, so I don't know where the rules came from. But clearly, Ken, and we just passed, allocates it 1 year, and then you get renegotiated. So if you're going to do something long-term, I don't know how you abide by those rules and try to restrict who or maintain who comes in. And I also looked on the website that somebody gave exclusivity to Chalk Hill, which got closed due to Sandy Hook. So I'm still confused as to how that happens without an RFP. And, I'd like to have some clarity around that. If I could, and I don't know whether you'll let me, but no longer me, now Enid Lapellis, she'd asked me to read something, 69 Ridgedale Road. She had 5 comments. One, Parks and Recreation should have full control and responsibility for the facility. That's our first point. Second, we would need strict rules on security. What happens if extremists, to your point, groups, we'll call them extremist groups, wanted to rent the pavilion? How would security be accomplished? Number 3, events can attract large groups of people. How would parking and transportation be implemented? Valid point. 4, how would funding be accomplished? Pre, during, and post. The pavilion we now have works very well for our 6 musical events, and to my knowledge, there have been no problems. Why make a massive new pavilion other than weather? Those are our points. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Lee, you'd like to say something else?
I just I'd like to talk to the issue of parking. I think we're really, and this was brought up earlier again tonight, that overflow parking is if we start getting really good shows coming in, you're going to have more than 300, 350 people like we've been having this summer with good turnout. The parking lots are full. I think we may maybe have to consider expanding the parking and making it a little nicer than it is in the overflow. That's kind of crude, but I think it's just something we have to put into the mix. It's going to cost some money too, so it needs to go into the budget or somehow. And it's very possible if we get some good entertainment. You're going to fill the house.
And just to be clear, there's a point of clarification that auxiliary parking lot has been going through planning and zoning and is being addressed. All those things that we talked about, the mowers, all that is being addressed, and over the time we're building the fields also, that is going to be addressed in conjunction with that. So over the next year, that will be addressed.
Although there is a very valid point, though, based upon the size and intended use of this structure will directly impact the planning and zoning parking requirements. And I want to be very clear that what's been, based on what there may not be enough there. So you're absolutely right, Lee, that could add significant costs, so we have to include that in our calculus. So
I know we're talking about cost, but I have another point. Tony, this one's for you because you're going to love it. From Memorial Day to Labor Day, we have a fee of $30 for people who don't have town stickers to park in that lot. Are we anticipating a lot of revenue from people coming to the conference that we hit with a $30 fee? If so, we should count the revenue in this to, the benefit of this.
Well, currently the auxiliary parking lot is not required to ask.
The auxiliary, but the 140 spots that are in the main.
close ones down.
Yeah, close ones down.
Not.
They're not. They don't have to pay.
That?
Just one thing that hasn't been brought up through this discussion, how long do the 2 new fields, courtesy of the Wilton Estate, start coming to use?
We're trying to keep
this is the pavilion, but
Well,
the bids
it's
are out to build the field.
What's that?
The bids are out for the field.
I'm only bringing it as relevant to the overall use of the park and the ability to park people on the parking lots in the park. You cannot be parking on those side streets. That'll land you in. But you've got two more fields that you're going to attract people. So again, it goes to
More use.
more use.
We're looking at
Just for clarification, only because this was brought up, to the best of my knowledge, at least when we've performed our shows in the park, we've never turned anyone away because of anything being inappropriate. And also as far as conflict, as far as events that are happening in the pavilion, our shows are performed at night after the park closed. So even people at the, we don't, as a matter of fact, we always wait until dusk for the lighting.
The concert,
We don't do the concert.
Sippin concert. It's the last one I went to. I know that's the place. But the Sippin concert, the pavilion, the picnic area is also rented out for a birthday party the same night, and there were cars all over the streets because there wasn't enough place to put people. So I'm not just looking at two blocks, right?
Okay.
It's concerts as well. It's, you just have to plan a call.
Right. Yeah, I just want to make that clarification.
Thanks.
Yes?
Lois Spence, 29 Partridge. I just wanted to bring up one thing that hadn't been addressed, and that was the consideration that they're thinking about possibly putting in Great Hollow. I think there might be a lot of issues with that. I remember quite a few years ago they talked about, putting a skating rink there. And they talked about having to upgrade the lighting. They had to upgrade the electricity. They had to upgrade the road because that road cannot accommodate safely a lot more people than it already does. So that would be a much, much more expensive proposition. That's all I wanted to throw out.
Thank you.
And also, again, for clarification, just as far as revenue, taking the, whether you talk about 300 or 400 people or not, up to 400 people, 600, we do pay $1 per ticket to the town, as well as, because they use it for the music concert series and music theater, we share the cost of the lighting costs since we both use it.
Right,
So-
they just went to 50/50 in June when they did the contract.
Yeah.
So instead of paying 70, the town pays 75 cents, 50/50.
Well-
Just a contract.
Well-
Let me just clarify on that. So relative to that cost sharing on that, the agreement memorialized what was in fact the practice, which was and the reason you can see 75/25 to 50/50 is depending on the number of weeks of utilization, it was a pro rata share. So year to year, that number would change depending on that for the period of use, and then the installation costs were shared on a 50/50 basis as well. Right.
Yeah, I'm not meaning to pick points.
No.
It's just, when you're preparing, then you're preparing for concerts and plays and everything else. So people see the venue, you gotta come up with something that's like, pick up your expenses.
Okay, any other comments? I wanted to ask one question before we wrapped up, because I think 3/4 of the general topics that I threw out there, we've covered quite a bit. There's one thing that I would like to hear more of, because I've heard a lot of anecdotal information prior to this meeting about different individuals and or groups that were interested in the project organization and more specifically, the fundraising activities around this project. And I want to see if there are any opinions or comments on that. And specifically, I specifically invited anyone interested in that, in providing that to come tonight. So if there's anyone here who is anyone individually or representing an organization that is interested in this project organization or fundraising, I please ask that you let me know now.
Robert Brimrack,
Yes.
20 Cross Hill. So I just wanted to, relative to fundraising and the ongoing operational costs, I think clearly if we were to undertake this, meeting all the other criteria that have been raised, if this were something that was agreed, this was a use that we wanted to permit, we wanted to put the right controls in place to ensure, similar to what the school board has in place to ensure that the content is appropriate for the venue and that there's places for people to park so that there's not disturbance, there's the appropriate acoustical engineering, so is all the rest of that. So with all those provisos in place, clearly it would be incumbent upon an organization, independent from the town, working in partnership with planning and zoning, to become the primary fundraising organization for that. And the objective of that fundraising should really be not only for the initial construction costs, but also for creating a reserve for the maintenance and upkeep of the facility for a period of time, with a replenishment of that reserve built into the operating model of how the rentals and so on might be managed on an ongoing basis, so that the town, it never becomes a burden to the town taxpayer in terms of paying for those things. I would consider it similar to some of the Parks and Rec program budgets, where those programs are effectively self-sustaining, and those budgets never come back to the general fund of the corporation of the town of Monroe. So that would be my perspective. I think there are individuals that are interested in doing that. There are organizations, service organizations that would be interested in partnering with that and participating in something of that nature. But I think everybody wants to make sure that we're all in agreement with what we want to do, and so that no fundraising or anything else be done prior to there being, the appropriate approvals and agreements in place, so as to not have to start a program of fundraising and then come 6 months, a year from now, determine that this is not going to go forward, and then have to figure out what to do with any funds that may have already been raised.
And how did you get out of there?
That's why you didn't talk. I was like, how did Jason not make a comment yet?
So that would be the
And on that note, Jason's here, everybody else.
All right, we're done.
Rob, were you done? I'm sorry, I want to cut you off. You're done?
No, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I agree, just to follow, I just want to comment on that, and I completely agree. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that there was no organization or entity proceeding until the concept had endorsement from the council to proceed, and along with that is recommendations that come from groups like the Parks and Rec Commission and other town agencies. I specifically want to throw it out there because I specifically asked in this meeting that any organizations or individuals interested in taking on that role, this is one of the primary reasons why I'm having this meeting, so we can know who's interested and what the parameters are, so that we can have further discussions and have all those conversations when the time is appropriate. So I agree with what you're saying, Rob.
I mean, I would suggest that at this point, given some of the contentiousness of the discussion that has emerged over the last 8 weeks relative to this, and all the discussion that's going on, I think is appropriate and needs to be done in order to do something that is appropriate for the town, whatever that decision is. I just want to make sure, I think you may find some people sort of sitting back right now and waiting to see, they don't necessarily want to engage with efforts until they know that it's something that is really, that has something that's going to have
Some have expressed that to me directly as well, so appreciate it. No? Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Since Mr. Mauer hasn't had a chance to speak yet, I'll give him the floor first, and then
Jason Mauer, 44 Stable Ridge Road, Monroe, Connecticut. First and foremost, thank you everybody for filibustering enough for me to get here in person. That was very well planned on all of your parts. Thank you very much. I was able to, fortunately, something that I think is important, being that I wasn't here until now, sit back and listen, and without comment, and listen to the concerns and listen to the benefits, to what all different members from all different parts of our community have to say. And there were certainly some very genuine concerns that need to be addressed. I feel a lot of those concerns are addressed as part of a planning phase rather than as part of a concept phase. A concept is simply, is this something that the town thinks could be a good idea and a benefit in addition to the town? And I would argue that without doubt, yes, it is on many, many different levels. First and foremost, I'll start with, there was a lively debate about recreation and what defines recreation. By the legal definition of recreation, entertainment is well within that scope. In fact, here in Monroe, when we had a teen recreation center, there were many, many times that concerts were held there. Throughout the state, throughout the town, throughout the country, you will find recreation centers, recreation areas where concerts, plays, arts are considered parts of recreation. In fact, many towns specifically called out centers as arts and recreation centers because they are supposed to be a shared community aspect. So as for recreation, it certainly would fit within the needs of the Parks and Recreation Department as well as both parks' need for active or passive recreation, whether you define it as either, because I can tell you being on stage, it can be extremely active recreation, and I can tell you from being in the audience, it can also be extremely passive, to sit there and just listen and enjoy. When it comes to what this brings to the town, it brings a number of benefits. First is just the community aspect. Giving the people of Monroe something and somewhere more to go, a reason to get out and go out and do something, and not just go to the park for the show, but then while they're out, go enjoy one of our many restaurants, go enjoy all of our businesses that we have in town, and allows those businesses to help sponsor events, to help put on events, to help bring things out into the public through their businesses. Which brings me to the next aspect that this brings, which is a drive for business and economic growth within the town. By bringing something like this, we talked about how already the concerts and the plays and that we put on at these facilities bring people not just from in town, but also out of town. And we could add to that. And what that does is not only increase those people's use of our businesses in town, but also draws other businesses to our town. We have many open, one of the things that I've heard Mr. O'Hara talk about on many occasions, as well as many other people, is the number of open storefronts we have. Well, bringing people into this town would help put people into those open storefronts, would help bring businesses, small businesses, larger businesses, because there's people to go to those businesses then. So it creates economic growth, which then creates a decrease in taxes, which is a benefit for everybody. You create economic growth, suddenly there's more business taxes coming into the town, which means the personal property taxes on our residential property start to take a lesser burden. So that is yet another benefit that this brings to the town. And I think the final, or not the final, but one more major benefit that it brings to the town is simply a showing of support for the, not just the people of the town, but also the organizations who want to be able to put something out to the rest of the town and share with the rest of the town their passion for certain projects. In the same way that you have young athletes being able to go out onto the fields and share their passion for soccer, for football, for baseball. You have just as many young people in this town, I would argue, who would love to be able to share their passion for singing, for acting, for juggling. What does it matter? What does it matter what the form of entertainment? The other concern that I heard brought up a lot was, well, how do we control who gets to rent it? Once you open the door to what is true. Once you open the door to a specific type of performance or use, it is open to other people within that type. But that does not mean because you rent to a theater that it is then open to political parties for rallies. It does not, once you open that area off to a concert, that does not mean that it is now open for somebody to rent out and put up their DJ equipment and just blast music as loud as they want for as long as they want. That is not what that means. It just means that you have to still rent it to like people, not to anybody. So once you've rented it to somebody, it does not mean that you now have to rent it to anybody, carte blanche, anybody has their opening. That's simply not the way that it works. It's just to like people. Also, the town can create a contract for these rentals that allow us control. And yes, I think as part of that contract, the things that need to be part of the consideration is the security costs, the police costs, the maintenance costs. Everything needs to go into that so that, as Mr. Primack was just saying, it becomes a self-sustaining model. It can certainly be that. There's no reason that it can't, so long as we as a town council and we as a town price it appropriately and rent it appropriately and utilize it appropriately. And that goes into the planning stages. That goes into the actual utilization stages and putting it into in operation stages. But it does not go into a concept stage. A concept stage is simply, is this good for the town? And in so many ways, yes it is. Are there things that need to be addressed after that concept so that it is the best for the town that it can be, and so that it doesn't keep the neighbors up late at night, and so that it doesn't keep people unable to go from their properties, and so that it doesn't keep us from being able to use our fantastic picnic areas? Of course there's things that need to be taken care of. But that goes into planning, not into concept. And as a concept, this is nothing but a benefit for this town.
Hang on there.
Anyone else? Mr. O'Hara?
I was just going to agree with Mr. Primrak when he was going through the fund, how fundraising would go, and how you move forward. The only thing I think it's important to make sure of is that potential fundraisers understand their relationship with the town. I'm putting on my Board of Finance hat now, because all funds, if there's a memorial fund, the stage maintenance memorial fund, that is a fund of the general fund, I believe, because you said something, and I don't want anybody to give to you and then get caught by surprise. The other thing, this may end up being a bond issue. Even though you raise the money, it still has to go through, procedure. And again, my comment to Ken is that as you get to whatever phases, folks who are doing fundraising have a clear understanding of how that money goes from you folks putting it in a bank account with a intent and then getting into concrete and mortar if this thing comes to life.
And we've, the exact kind of conversations we've had with our finance department and a little bit with Board of Finance, not a whole lot yet, but yeah, we have to consider those because it gets down to not just who raises the funds, but then what is that organization then doing? Are they merely turning funds over to the town to proceed, or are they actually going to go ahead and assist with actual build activities, and then you get the issues of, town obviously has an interest in oversight and all that, so it gets, that gets deep in the weeds, but all things that have to be considered. And we need to know those answers before we start having organizations collect funds.
And just one other comment, Ken, I think folks forget to debate upon whether it's an active or passive or entertainment. You got a parking situation, and right now under the zoning regulations, the mere fact that there's a basketball court reduces your parking. Tennis court reduces your parking. So even though we can do shared parking under the zoning regulations, that tennis court is still operational, that basketball court is still operational because of lights. So that's going to reduce the total. So Dennis, did you say there's 280 spots, give or take?
280 in the, if
We'll
you
call it
create it with the overlap and the main one, yeah, 280.
We'll call it 300 for ease of math. I mean, you got 300, you're going to knock out maybe 20 or 40 for the other uses. And I don't know what else may or may not be shared. And from there, you're going to have to find your parking. That might, right there, that may end your moving forward, because without parking, you can't do it.
Or you come up with an alternate plan to bus people over from some other lot. I mean,
That's not a parking plan. On-site parking is required in the zoning regulations. You can do shared parking, but each of the fields, each of the uses generates a calculation. Now, to Mr. Primrak's point, he's at night. So, you can knock out some of these fields, and that increases the available parking. But at the end of the day, if you're going to have 400 people show up for a performance, and let's say it's, a 0.75 or 0.50, 2 people per car kind of thing, because they have to come up with a ratio, still need 200 spots or something like that. So if you can't make that work, or you make a smaller pavilion, or you sell a smaller number of tickets, I don't know how you do it.
And there's also the question too, I think that has been contemplated in the past, is do you open up one of the upper fields as open for parking spaces?
It's a football field?
Not the football field, but the one.
Well, the Parks and Rec Commission won't even let us play if there's rain. So, I don't know if you're gonna go parking cars, but again, that was the comment, you gotta take parking.
Thank you, yes.
If
Dave?
there's a comment on something Jason had said, which is the idea of a concept versus, it doesn't even necessarily have to be concretely beneficial to the town, but if it's decided that there is a potential for it being beneficial for the town, that's all that's needed with the concept, because once you approve the concept that it could potentially be beneficial, then that gets approved, and the next step is actually doing the investigating and the planning to vet out the details of how it will or can be beneficial optimally.
I think we all have the same probably intent here, but we might be using similar terms in a different fashion. So I have a project concept review process to obtain council consensus before we have a project continue down the path of planning, because we're chewing up a lot of staff time, we're chewing up a lot of boards and commissions, and we're doing it on the presumption that is a town-endorsed project, right? The most important thing that I'm concerned about is fundraising on behalf of the town for something that the town hasn't really signed off on yet, right? So
Right.
It goes back to our earlier question. So, we can sit here and haggle over what the proper term is. The point of it is, my point of it is that I don't, before we go down a path of investing, until we get to the point where we're going to start, fundraising and drawing up,
Yeah.
plans and getting designs. I think we need to, we simply need to have, all the interested parties, and we need to all agree that we, as a community, feel that we have enough information, that we feel, we've got our kind of ducks in a row, and we understand how this is going to work, and we understand what the governance is going to be of the whole thing, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's why we're here. That's what we're trying to all figure out together. Is what's the scope of this? Where do we really want it to be? And we've had a lot of good conversations. We're all assuming. I think we don't all know what you say. What one person says pavilion may not equate to what someone else means in terms of size, in terms of scope, in terms of what types of offerings may or may not be allowed there. So that's why we're having this conversation. So. Okay. Anything else? Anyone else?
Just want to let you know, I'm not against it. That's it, I'm done.
Anyone else? Last call? I don't want to...
Very, very quickly, based off of the town council discussions when we did go through this, I think there seemed to be one thing that was fairly agreed upon throughout the members of council, and that when we're talking about who should be running this, it should be something along the lines of similar to the playground. It's a separate 501c3, or a separate 501c3 organization, and that while to the point that until there was an idea of, yes, they should truly organize, some people I know have been sitting in the backstage, so to say, sitting in the wings, waiting to see what kind of this meeting brought. I think that's where the next steps would be, is for those interested parties to get together, form a 501c3, and as a 501c3, bring a new project concept to the town council.
I think that we can certainly be entertained, but I specifically put out that the purpose of this meeting was for those interested parties to come here tonight and express those views directly. So I've said it before, I'll say it again, if there's anyone here tonight that is interested individually or as an organization or forming an organization to do that, that's why I'm having this meeting. So, if something comes up subsequently, we can certainly address it at that point in time. So, okay. Yes.
I'm going to piggyback, Jennifer Aguilar, 32 Surreyman. I'm just going to piggyback on what Jason also said was my biggest concern when this was brought to town council was who was running it, was reading the subsequent articles in the paper on how the fundraising was going to be done. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was selling merchandise to fundraise that was in an EDC budget. EDC was planning to sell merchandise to raise money for the pavilion. So that to me was the biggest thing. So if somebody were to come step up, I think this is a great concept. I'm completely for it. I loved the plays. Maybe didn't love this summer's, but that's okay. But I love the concerts. Can't wait till Wednesdays. I think it's a great idea.
And Friday.
Friday? This Friday?
Next one.
Next Friday. Oh, okay, that's good. I was thinking it was Wednesday, the day before school.
And two things would be interested in working with other organizations within the town. We, at this council meeting, we're talking about the MACC, which I guess oversees all of our organizations within the town. So we will be, I'm still relatively new as far as directorship of the theater, but we will be in contact with them.
Okay. Did you say you're part of MACC?
No.
That's your parent organization?
Well, no, not, it's, from what I understand, the MACC is an umbrella organization that helps coordinate different parts of organizations within the town.
It's not an organization, to my knowledge, it's a group of people. So that's what I've been told. So I've heard they may be interested in forming into an organization, but I haven't seen that yet.
I'll
So,
look into that first.
so, yeah, but that's certainly a possibility if that's something they want to pursue.
Ryan Compton, 9 Stillwater Ridge Road, just kind of going on. Is EDC still working fundraising for this?
No.
They're not. They stopped? Okay. That's it.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Just curious question.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Any thought been given to lighting the new athletic field that's going in and back?
There are no lights.
Zero. No, there's zero lights, but you're putting in conduit, aren't you? Has anybody thought, because if you choose A, it limits B. Parks and Rec becomes the planning board when you start a planning study of the park. And again, it comes down to parking. You know, people are talking about the concept of this, whether it's a good concept or, it's not a good concept or a bad concept, it's, can you fit it? And to fit it, you need to park it. And you're getting a field in back, I've walked that field, for a residential area, that field may actually work for sports field lighting. I don't know how the neighbors feel about that, but it certainly isn't across the street from them. And if you light it, it now creates conflict. So again, getting back to that master plan, we talked about, what are you folks going to do? Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Anything else? Last chance.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.